Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. For today's video, I want to review a movie that was suggested to me by a couple of my friends. It's a newer movie. It came out in 2016, but it is a French film. It did get released in the US theaters about a year after it was released in Europe, and this movie was written and directed by an up-and-coming French filmmaker, this being her debut film. Now, her name is French, obviously. I'm only going to try to pronounce it once, and from here on out, I'm just going to refer to her by her first name, but her whole name, and I'll put it on the screen as well, is I think pronounced Julia Diconu or something along those lines. As I said, I'm not going to pronounce it again, so I'm just going to call her Julia from here on out. But yes, this was her debut film, and it was kind of a big deal. It won a ton of awards in the film festivals that it was a part of, and it's definitely a bold movie to have as your first debut horror film. But before we get too much into that, let me start by giving you guys a quick synopsis of the movie. Now, the movie was originally released under the title Grave in Europe, but for American film it is referred to as Raw. As I said, it came out in 2016, and in this movie we follow a sort of super genius girl. From what I read, she was 16 years old. Her name is Justine, and she has been accepted into the same veterinarian school that both her parents graduated from and her older sister is currently attending. It's a big deal that given that she is so young, so she's sort of supposed to be like the family's genius, and everyone's really excited that she's finally getting to go. And Justine and her family are strict vegetarians. They do not eat any meat. She has never eaten meat in her life. And when she gets to the school, she starts to realize that she's no longer in the comfort of her own home under her own family traditions. Part of the school's initiation is a full week of hazing where the older veterinarian students sort of just are dicks to the younger kids. But one of the hazing rituals is the younger students get a bunch of blood dumped on them, and then they have to eat a small part of raw rabbit liver. Now Justine is like, I can't do that, I'm a vegetarian. And her sister comes over and she's like, it's easy, what, are you gonna always listen to what mom and dad say? And her sister eats a couple and she's like, see, it's easy, and she makes Justine eat one. And this is the first time Justine has ever had meat. So she's kind of dry heaving and gagging. I can only imagine raw rabbit liver is disgusting. And then later that night, she wakes up broken out in a horrible rash. She goes to the doctor, and the doctor says it's probably just food poisoning. She gives her a cream and sends her on her way. Now, during her first week of vet school, she's sort of just very thrown off. She feels very isolated. Her roommate, which she had requested to be a girl, turns out to be just a gay male. Adrian's actually a pretty fun character. I do like him. He offers a lot of just simple, natural comedic relief throughout the movie, and he's probably Justine's only friend there. So it's kind of following these two as they go through their first week at vet school, and Justine is starting to have these cravings that she's never had before. She starts craving meat, but not just a hamburger. She starts eating raw chicken out of the fridge, and she's embarrassed by this craving for meat. Adrian even takes her off campus so she can eat a sandwich of meat in private so she doesn't have to be seen by everyone else, because she made a big deal about being a vegetarian. As the days go on, the craving only seems to get worse, and she's not just craving raw dead animal meat, but starts to actually crave human flesh. And one night, while she is hanging out with her sister in her sister's dorm, her sister Alex is trying to give her a Brazilian wax, and the wax gets stuck on Justine's inner thigh, and her sister is like, that's weird, it's not ripping, let me get some scissors. And Justine's like, I am not letting you use scissors down there. And they're kind of bickering back and forth about it. And Justine, who has always sort of had her decisions made for her in life, sort of just snaps on her sister, and she screams, no, this is my pussy, and she kicks her sister's hands. And as Alex falls to the ground after being kicked, she slowly comes back up to show that she accidentally cut her finger off with the scissors. So that much of her finger is just missing. And Alex looks at it and then just passes out from shock. So Justine is panicking. She calls for help, is told it's gonna be 15 minutes before someone can get there, but she's told to put the finger on ice. So she starts looking for ice. She's holding the finger, she can't find any, and the finger is dripping blood, and Justine sort of just pulls some of the blood in her hand and licks it, and the finger dripped onto her hand as she was licking it, so she licked up and then put the finger in her mouth and started sucking the blood off of the finger. So then Justine is realizing, oh my god, people taste great, and she starts eating her sister's finger like it's a piece of corn on the cob. It's sort of ridiculous seeing, and as this is happening, Alex wakes up and sits up and sees her sister eating her finger. and she has this look of just horror. She's like one single tear that goes down her face. But whenever we go to the hospital and her parents ask her, were they able to sew your finger back on, Alex says, no, because my dog ate it. So she's covering for Justine, although she just saw her eating her own finger. So later on, Alex takes Justine to sort of a backcountry road. You can tell that she's angry with Justine, but she's not admitting to why she's angry. And after walking down the road for a little bit, Alex stops Justine and they sort of hide down on the side of the road behind a fence. And Justine's like, you know, what's going on? Alex, why aren't you talking to me? And Alex is like, just stay here. And she runs out into the road in front of a car that swerves and slams into a tree to avoid her. Justine, after realizing Alex is okay, goes over to the car and sees the two people inside of it. And while one of them is dead, the other one's just barely alive. Justine is freaking out, and Alex says, well, shut up, I did this for you. And then Alex goes over to the survivor, says, I don't think he's gonna make it, and then starts to just lick at the wound on his head. So now we've got two sisters who are not afraid to eat people, and Alex is obviously not afraid to cause people to die to eat them. Justine is horrified by this and runs down the road and ends up just walking back to the school. And Justine obviously does not want to have to eat people, so she's having withdrawals. We get a lot of sort of hallucinations that you aren't sure are hallucinations because you just really can't tell what's Justine's imagination and what's reality. She's going through these withdrawals. She's having a lot of animalistic feelings. She admitted to the doctor earlier on that she was still a virgin, but now she's starting to have these sexual cravings as well as these animalistic, like, meat-eating cravings. So she's going through a lot, and it sort of is building and escalating. She ends up at a paint party where two people get painted primary colors and then they have to go into a closet to mix them together to make a new one. And when Justine gets pushed into the closet with the guy she's paired with, they start to, you know, rub the paint on each other, and he starts to kiss her, and she bites his bottom lip off, not just bites it, like a chunk is missing, it's in her teeth. And then like later on, she gets really drunk at a party, and Alex, who is probably still pissed about the finger thing, takes her into the morgue and then dangles a dead body's arm in front of Justine as she's like laying on the floor, and Justine is like growling and jumping at it like a dog would. And people do film this. Justine's blackout drunk and doesn't know it. Finds out the next day from her roommate Adrian, who shows her a video. And when she confronts Alex about this out in the courtyard, they start to have a huge fight. Alex bites a chunk of Justine's cheek out. And then the two are kind of wrestling around, and they each get each other's arms in their mouths and start to just eat each other's arms in front of a bunch of people. So now people are getting very suspicious of these two sisters because they're just acting totally off the wall, bizarre. Justine's obviously having a lot of internal issues. Alex is not really being supportive, but sort of being supportive. Alex obviously knows something about what Justine is experiencing. Justine even found the same cream in Alex's bathroom that the doctor had given her. So she's making these connections that Alex has gone through the same thing that Justine's going through. But after everything is cooled down between Alex and Justine, they go back to her dorm. Alex sort of just helps patch Justine up, and we assume that they fall asleep. We don't really see what happens. And then the next morning, Justine wakes up. She's laying in bed with Adrian. She takes off the bandage. She rolls over and like touches his face and touches down his body, and then puts her arm under the blanket and goes presumably down there. And then she pulls her hand up and it's bloody. So then she removes the blanket to reveal that half of his right leg is gone, like eaten to the bone. We see the bone. And she starts panicking, like full on freaking out, and she's like trying to wake him up. Blood now is pouring out of his mouth, and she's shaking him, yelling, you know, like, why didn't you fight back? You should have tried to stop me. Why didn't you stop me? And that's when she discovers a hole in his back, which was made by the ski poles that he keeps in his room. She sees the bloody ski pole on the ground and realizes that someone had attacked him with the ski pole by stabbing it through his back. She gets up and finds Alex in the kitchen, sitting on the floor, sort of in a daze. She's not really reacting in real time. She's staring off into the distance. She just looks like she's experienced something horrible. And Justine makes the realization that Alex killed Adrian so they could eat his leg. And Justine's angry. She takes the ski pole and puts it into the middle of Alex's forehead, threatening to just jam it through her skull. Alex is just looking at her, obviously understanding that she's made a mistake. Justine takes her into the shower, washes her off, cleans all the blood off of her, and then the scene fades, and then we go into a jail where Alex is behind bars. She was arrested for the murder of Adrian, Justine and her family are there talking to her through the glass. And the last interaction between Alex and Justine is Alex holding up the hand with missing finger and her own middle finger, and then Justine pressing her cheek scar against the glass, and Alex kisses it and they wave goodbye, and that's it. And then we go back to the house where Justine's sitting with her parents at the dinner table. Her mom's like, finish your vegetables. And Justine's like, I'm not really that hungry. So her mom collects the dad and mom's plates, puts them in the sink, and says, you're gonna sit there till you done your vegetables. The dad is like, don't take it too personally. She's just upset with the situation. It's not your fault. And she's like, I know. And then the dad says, it's not Alex's fault either. And Justine's like, well, what do you mean? And this is when her dad sort of gives us the only little bit of a hint as to why these girls have this cannibalistic instinct. And he tells her the story of how when he first met their mother, he never understood why she wouldn't kiss him. She never wanted to touch him or kiss him. And he's like, and it wasn't until the first time that we kissed that I realized why she didn't want to. And this is actually the first time in the film that we see her father's face full on with bright lighting, and you can see a very obvious scar in his upper lip where it looks like someone bit a chunk of his lip out. Justine starts to have a horrible realization that maybe her mother is the cause of this, and her father starts unbuttoning his shirt to reveal all of these scars of just chunks of skin being taken out. And the movie ends with him saying the line, maybe you can find the solution. Okay, so as I said, it is a French film, so this movie does come with subtitles. I don't speak French, but I could also tell that some of the subtitles were translated for Americans, mainly just because of some of the dialogue that was in French went on for a lot longer than the dialogue in English did. And even when reading reviews, some of the quotes from characters that were used were quotes that I don't remember reading. So I'm assuming that in French there is a little bit more depth to the dialogue, because some parts are a little bit hard to keep up with, mainly because you do have to read back and forth really fast. It's hard to get the kind of cadence that they're going for. But all around, I would say that this is a good film. As I said, it won a ton of awards whenever Julia was taking it around to different film festivals. She won a few festivals in France and then started showcasing it around Europe before it was officially in theaters in 2016. Although the theatrical release maybe was not exactly what she expected. I read that I believe it was in a French cinema. It was definitely in Europe. There was a theater that at least 30 people walked out on. Within those 30, 2 people passed out, and at least 5 reported vomiting halfway through the film. There was another theater that had to pause halfway through the film to clean up because people were vomiting in the theaters. And the movie isn't really that gory or bloody. We don't see a lot of the killing or the eating. The most in-depth human eating that we see is whenever Justine is eating her sister's finger. But I mean, the car crash, we don't get to see the crash, we just see the aftermath. We see Alex licking some of the guy's head, but we don't see her, ripping meat off of him. And we don't even see Adrian's death or them eating his leg. And even the scene where Justine bites the guy's lip off, we don't see it, we just hear him screaming. And my boyfriend had to humble me a little bit on this because I was talking to him about this movie and I was like, it's so weird. All these people were throwing up and leaving the theaters, but you don't even get to see anything. And that's when he had to explain to me that the idea of cannibalism, that grosses people out. And it was after he said this that I realized how natural the cannibalism is in this movie. I am very much used to sort of Texas Chainsaw Massacre-esque cannibalism where it's just over the top. And even my friend who was telling me about this movie said that she feels like it's more of a realistic horror movie versus a slasher. And I can agree with that because it is very almost accidental. The finger was just there. She didn't cut Alex's finger off. It was just on the floor. The guy she was making out with, she wasn't intending to bite his lip, she just did. And even Adrian, she did not kill him, Alex did. She just consumed the flesh after Alex killed him. So it is more accidental cannibalism and this feeling of trying something new, loving it, and having to get more. It's just a more natural build up to it versus kind of coming into the middle of someone who's been eating people for years and years and years. And there are a lot of cinematic differences between this movie and a film that would be shot in America. Honestly, the cinematography is gorgeous. I have noticed that with European films, especially French films, they're very good at setting an atmosphere and creating kind of a sense within the film, and that is done just with the lighting and the music that is used. We see Justine going through withdrawals at one point, and it's this beautiful shot from under the sheets with her, and there's like a silhouette above her that sounds like it's beating her with like a chain or something, and it's just withdrawals from not having meat. But the music and the lighting, it's like this soft, billowy, dreamy-esque lighting. It gives you that sense of disorientation where you can't tell if it's reality or sort of a flashback or something. And elements like that you don't see the same way in American film, which for me was one of the better parts of the movie. There was a good balance between having really quiet scenes and then something loud and in your face happening. And those sort of quick cuts and, dark, quiet scene to a suddenly loud and bright scene, even if that loud and bright scene is just, students in a hallway. It's a good way to subtly startle the viewer without necessarily doing a jump scare. The only thing about that is you do anticipate something coming because of how quiet and slow it is, and there were like 2 or 3 points in the movie where this happened, so it did become predictable a little bit, but it was just a fun and interesting way to kind of get you out of that unsettling scene into something even that's light and happy, but still sort of startling you out of the intensity that you were just watching. And when I was looking into Julia just as a director and creative person, I'm really liking who she is, and I'm excited and hoping that she's going to create more horror movies in the future. I really like Julia as a creative and the approach that she takes with this film. She wanted to make a coming-of-age movie that empowered the women in it and showed a young girl sort of branching out from the traditions that she was told to grow up with and sort of finding herself, even though that self is a cannibalistic monster. Julia wanted to represent that sort of growth as a woman and realizing your sexuality and, doing what you want to do and becoming who you want to become. But this sort of like coming of age through an analogy of like cannibalism isn't a horribly new concept in horror movies. One film in particular I saw compared a lot to this is the movie Ginger Snaps, which I will be making a future video about as it is on the 50 best horror movies list, so look forward to that. But that is sort of another movie about coming of age of a girl. She turns out to be a werewolf, but eats people, still all the same. So it's not an analogy that's new, and it's not a concept that's new, but it is a new approach to showing it, because this is more about the subtle changes in Justine and her going through this transformation basically by herself. She had no idea her mom had gone through this. She had no idea her sister was going through it, and her sister never fully confronted her about it, so Justine was still left with all these answers and sort of figuring things out on her own. Because Justine does end up like losing her virginity in the movie. She is kissing boys, she's wearing dresses, she's going to parties, she's drinking, she's growing up a lot faster than she can almost process. And that could possibly be a situation that other women have experienced, being told what you should do, when you should do it, how you should do it, and Justine sort of just gets fed up, and everyone who comes at her with solutions, she sort of just yells at them. And it's like, I want to do it how I want to do it. I've lived my whole life listening to what everyone else tells me to do. It's my turn to do that for myself. So it is a very empowering message behind the film. But I think like my biggest issue with the movie, and I don't even know if it's considered an issue because it's more of a personal thing, is I am so interested to know, what is the mom? Like, is she a sort of creature? She's not like a vampire, but she obviously, whatever she has or is, gave it to her children. And I also don't want to parent shame, but I feel like her parents are more responsible for Adrian's death than anything else, because her dad says he was hoping Alex would find a solution, and she didn't, so now he's hoping Justine will find a solution. But that means that their parents didn't tell them that this was going to happen if they ate meat. They kept them a vegetarian their whole lives so they wouldn't taste meat, so they wouldn't eat people. And then they let them go to college without telling this information. And as much as you harp on your children to follow your own traditions, when they go to college, they're gonna do whatever they want. So to assume that their children weren't going to eat meat and oh, it'll be fine, they're not gonna run the risk of eating people, I think the parents just should have been a little bit more aware and maybe have warned the girls. Or just been just don't eat meat because then you're going to want to eat people. So I feel like the parents probably could have stopped a lot of the carnage that happened in this film by just informing their children that you might have this disease, affliction, I don't know what. But I think the point of the movie is more about the story of Justine going through these changes in her life versus why she's changing like this. So I think we're supposed to kind of listen more to the analogy than take the story at face value, which I can totally understand. But being someone who watches a lot of horror movies and being someone who has seen this analogy done before, I've never seen it done in this way, and I've never seen characters like this that just have this cannibalistic need as soon as they eat meat. To me personally, that's more interesting and that's what I want to know about. But all in all, yes, I did like this movie. I think it is a good modern horror movie, and I think it's impressive that it's a movie that was able to have a strong women empowering message behind it and also make people leave the theaters throwing up, which I think to have people leave the theaters throwing up in 2016 is a pretty good feat. We're hitting a point in horror where we've seen sort of it all. We've seen a lot of stuff done, so to still have reactions like this in theaters, I think that's a win in of itself. This movie is very heavily sexualized. As I said, it's sort of an analogy for Justine's coming of age, so be prepared to see, you get boobs in the beginning, you get butts and boobs sprinkled throughout. We get to see Justine lose her virginity to Adrian. It all happens really fast. It is a very sexually heavy movie. I think the most bizarre part to me is Justine is in her dorm room with her headphones in, and she's in a dress that Alex had given her, and she's sort of swaying to the music that she's listening to, in the mirror watching herself. She's swaying back and forth and sort of just dancing. She's admitted earlier in the movie that she's never really partied or been seductive, so I'm assuming she's trying to practice that here. But the song she is listening to is so graphic. There's literally a line that's I like to fuck the dead over and over again. It's an intense song, and Justine's putting on lipstick and kissing the mirror and dancing. It's really bizarre. And I looked into it because I had to know who did this song. And it's a rap rock sister duo called Ortiz. Ortiz, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's a really obscure band, but Julia chose them to write this song because they are a rock rap duo who sing and rap about men the same way men rap about women. So they are a lot about taking back the overly sexualized nature of rappers versus women, but basically reversing the roles. So even everything, including the music used in this film, is to empower women in a way. So although that scene was bizarre as hell, it's kind of a cool little nugget that's put in there. But yeah, all in all, I do really enjoy this movie. It is a good bloody movie that's not super gory, but it's more about what they're eating and what they're doing versus how it looks, if that makes sense. I definitely do recommend you to see this if you haven't already. It's a technically beautiful movie. It's got a good story to it, and it's got that underlying sense of empowerment towards women, which I'm always going to be behind. You'll get some boobs, you'll get some blood, so what more could you really ask for? Just make sure you do pay attention. As I said, it is a French film. There are English subtitles, but you do have to really read and keep up with the dialogue, because if you don't, you will miss sort of small nuances. There isn't a lot of explanation given in this film, so it's important that you pay attention to what is happening. If you guys have seen this movie, I'd love to know what you think. Please leave comments down below or head over to my Instagram, What a Horror. I'll be making a post about this video as well. As always though, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to see new videos, because I put out new videos every Friday. And until next time, stay spooky.